Now, here's John Paul, the Car Doctor.
And good Sunday morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Car Doctor program on 95.9 WATD. My name is John Paul, the Car Doctor, here to help you with your car problems. And remember, if you missed a program and you want to go back and listen to something, there's, 800 programs on all of your popular podcasting channels, Spotify and iTunes and all those other things, and go and listen to them all. They're from this station, former station before that. There's a bunch of them out there, and there's even some so old that I think we videoed them and put the videos up, but another time. There are times where I really like driving cars, and there's certain kinds of cars I liked, and some of the ones I always liked driving was a diesel with a manual transmission. Now, they didn't make too many of those. Volkswagen made one, BMW made one. But diesel engines are always fun to drive. And similar in performance, I guess, to a diesel is an electric car, but, you have to go charge it. And charging an electric car is not that convenient. I live on Cape Cod. There's virtually no place to conveniently charge an electric car, especially fast. There's a couple of slow chargers, kind of level 2 chargers that they're in hotel parking lots, not so friendly sometimes to get to. Still gasoline and diesel, it's abundant, it's everywhere. And can diesel match the performance and the low emissions of an electric vehicle? Well, with us is Casey Putz. He is engineer, philanthropist, mechanic, race car driver. Casey, you're like you're the man of all seasons, it seems like.
Yes, and also the last name is pronounced Putz, as in put your money where your mouth is. Respectfully.
Well, I was working on it. We were getting there.
Yeah.
So Putz.
I wouldn't have been the guess I would have taken, but yes, thank you. I have been called a Renaissance man from time to time, but mostly I just like to get things done and think for myself and play with all kinds of cars.
And one of the things you have is a garage where you restore and repair some pretty exotic cars too, right?
I do that, yes. And, of course, YouTube with the Casey the Car Guy channel, and told a lot of stories there as well. But, I love a lot of different cars through all of industrialized history. Vintage race cars and motorsports history is a great love of mine. And actually, I'm sitting here talking to you with my feet up on the front bumper of my 1931 Buick Phaeton. But love stuff that's fast, love stuff from Europe and especially Italy, and even some motorcycles. So if it's good and it's got wheels, I like it.
Well, locally here in Massachusetts, there's a engineer who I think he's in his 90s now, and for years he's been saying electric cars are not the answer that everybody thinks they are. And in fact, I think more than 20 years ago, he invented a gasoline engine that uses heated pressurized fuel and got quite low emissions and could burn almost just about anything, really, and got well over 100 miles per gallon, at least in prototype stages. And even in his later years, he stuck this engine in a Prius because Prius is fairly aerodynamic, and stuck it in a Prius, and the thing got like well over 100 miles per gallon. And again, it had pretty low emissions. So you did something a little bit different. You did it with a diesel, right?
Indeed, and you hit on two very interesting points there, and segueing into where I went. Electric cars are a fascinating tool, and there are many places where they're exceptional. However, it would be very silly to think that the entirety of planet Earth, for every need, every motoring need in every country and every nation, that electric is the answer. So that's simply silly to think. And especially with the time we live in now, with electric mandates coming from political parties and such, you have to look around and think, what's going on? And with what you said with regard to people who have worked on internal combustion, evolution, and its efficiencies, a liquid does not burn as efficiently or quickly as fuel in its gaseous state. So, in my observations of automotive history and industrialized history, we have a lot of fuel, whether we're using diesel or kerosene or gasoline or anything. And we make our engines so they work and last, but there's a lot more that can be done. So with regard to what I did, this is something like 12 years ago now. I frankly was very frustrated with the hollow rhetoric of presidential politicians. And after riding around on my motorcycle and looking at all the new cars being sold and giving consideration to that, thinking about all the things I knew in material science, et cetera, I realized these politicians are full of poop. And I could make something much better that would be a more sustainable, recyclable, lower environmental impact, more affordable manufacturing process. So I set out to build a concept car called the Omega Car, which you can see on my YouTube channel on the internet, that would be representative of more intelligent manufacturing. And I focused on the nature of the car, not just the engine, or the power plant, because I can build a car powered by an electric motor or a gasoline motor or diesel. But I chose turbo diesel. And the reason being is that it was obvious to me that the world, and especially Americans, understand miles per gallon and performance figures like 0 to 60 a lot better than they do kilowatt hours, et cetera. So I built the car. This is back in 2012, 2013. And to be honest, I sat on it for a lot of years because I didn't have a voice. And, if the world doesn't see what you did, it's kind of like if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, did it really make a sound? Well, I wanted to make sure that my car made a sound. And after becoming a YouTuber and helping out engineering students for the last decade and kind of getting a little bit of a voice there, with this being an election year and there are a lot of topical important things, I decided to go ahead and test it. Now, originally, about 10 years ago, I said it will do over 100 miles per gallon and it will get 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds, mark my words. So I tested it. The first time out, just driving through the countryside normally, including turns and stop signs, it got 104.72 miles per gallon on straight diesel. And the next day when I tested 0 to 60 with proper gauges, with using GPS and accelerometers, it came in at 4.61 seconds. And at the same time, with the same gauge, I also tested a 1993 Dodge Viper RT10, which came in 0.2 of a second slower than my car, getting over 100 miles a gallon. I also tested 2019 C7 Corvette Grand Sport, and it was exactly the same 0 to 60 as my 100-plus mile gallon car. And I tested my neighbor's Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive, to be fair, because these are all rear-wheel drive cars, at a full charge. And the best it could do was 4.60 seconds, beating it by 100th of a second. And from there, it progressively got slower. So the point was simple. We can do better. We're manufacturing cars badly. Electric vehicles are not a Band-Aid solution for the entirety of the world, and the mandates coming from Washington are silly at best. And it's time we really look at things objectively rather than politically or emotionally, because we can do better. And that's what I wanted to prove.
And tell me about the diesel power plant in this. Was this taken from something else? Was it where'd it come from?
Well, it is production based. It is 1.9 liter turbo diesel. And that was important to do because I wanted to show that if you manufacture things intelligently, that we can do this with what we already have. So it's not by any means some crazy multi-million-dollar bespoke R&D, finely tuned, Fabergé egg of an engine. It's something that was available, and that's important. So that's really it. In other cars, it may have been getting a third of that mile a gallon. Maybe a little bit better, but it's really about what we do with cars. If you look at cars driving down the road, whether it's a four-door sedan, even a sports car, or a truck, I mean, we're still basically building cars the same way we did in the late 1930s. They are stamped steel boxes with chairs bolted in them, wildly inefficient, especially aerodynamics and such. And there's a lot of cultural norms there, and they take a lot of energy to create. But the other thing that's vastly important, and this is going to shock some people. So after I did those figures on my car, in terms of driving, getting over 100 miles a gallon on diesel, and then I started to look at do a little math, because the EPA will give you numbers as to what is the kilowatt hour, what is the electricity equivalency of 1 gallon of diesel. And then I look at things like how much electricity does a Tesla with various batteries actually store? And I started looking at things like, okay, what is the carbon dioxide greenhouse gas emissions per gallon of diesel burned? But what is the carbon dioxide greenhouse gas emissions per kilowatt hour of electricity generated. Because this is where the general populace is messing up, and all those people eating their avocados on the Malibu Pier don't realize. We have an environmental impact to generate electricity. And I'm not even just talking about coal or nuclear. If you take the average of all of the electricity generated in the United States, if you charge your electric vehicle at home, so I did the math. And once I did that, I realized that my Omega car with a production-based diesel, four-cylinder diesel engine emits less carbon dioxide greenhouse gas per mile than a Tesla when charged at home, considering the national average of electricity generation. And also, with the numbers that I was getting, real world, my car is cheaper to run on diesel than it is to charge an EV at home. And it blows it out of the water when you consider the added cost of doing a supercharger station. And I think that's very important. Obviously, mine is a concept car, but it is a proof of concept. And the whole reason to do it was to get everyone to go, whoa, let's reassess what we're doing here so that we can make good cars that are efficient and affordable first. And the beautiful byproduct about making something efficient and affordable is you have a lower environmental impact. So that's really what was pretty exciting to see. It was a concept of mine over a decade ago in response to what I consider the poor rhetoric of politicians. Respectfully, I'd like to see a politician build a car or even change their oil. But we can do better if we just stop for a minute, look around, and think.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the car for a minute. How much does it weigh?
It's over 2,000 pounds.
Okay, so
I haven't weighed it recently.
Yeah, but it's in that 2,000 pound range or so.
You know what? I'd have to go back and weigh it.
Yeah. Okay.
To be perfectly honest, the weight isn't as wildly important as you might think.
Well, I'm just comparing. I'm comparing it to something like a Factory 5 Cobra kit. You know, you put 450 horsepower in a Factory 5 Cobra, and this thing is screamingly fast. And similar to what you did, you took a fairly lightweight car compared to the 2 and 3 ton SUVs on the road, and you put a efficient diesel engine in it. And like I said, I've been a fan of diesels since forever because I always liked the way they performed. You know, they had great instant torque, almost like an electric car. They were fun to drive. They were economical. Good choice for people. And and then Volkswagen cheated with emissions, and all of a sudden, nobody wants a diesel. GM still makes a couple of small diesels. And I have a hunch about that whole Dieselgate thing with Volkswagen. Did they potentially fudge that a little bit? Good chance. However, I also think that was over a long time kind of a weaponized attack, this crushed diesel, because these electric mandates, and I'm just going to talk direct, this is a nonpartisan, this is just an objective look at it. The diesel mandates have been coming for a few decades. I mean, if you look back to the Clinton administration, that was when the EPA was coming out with miles per gallon equivalent for electric cars, which I knew was BS back then, even when I was just a teenager that liked cars. I'm like, there's no way. This is math calisthenics to make people think a certain way. And then when we come up all the way up to the current presidential administration with Biden, these electric vehicle mandates, that, a certain percent, a large percent, or all cars sold by a certain, they have to be electric. There's something I feel more global and more national going on that's fishy. And I think attacking diesel systematically, both through media as well as lawsuits and lawfare like that, is purposefully done. Because diesel is actually a wildly important and flexible fuel. You can create biodiesel. It's very user-friendly. And that's why diesel's got to be the most used liquid fuel in the world. We use it for all of our ships. Kerosene and jet fuel is very, very similar to diesel if you think about it. Yep.
In fact, in military turbine engines and stuff, they flat out have the ability to just run. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think there's a lot more going on than just saying that a car manufacturer fudged it. Now we have to destroy an entire fuel for the world. I think there's more to it going on.
Well, and my kind of thought on that was that, first off, I knew that there was an issue because my full-time employer, one of our associates, has a four-wheel EPA-approved dyno, and we put one of the Volkswagen diesels on it and plugged into the OBD connector, and all of a sudden the numbers changed. And it was as simple as plugging something in with like one of those insurance snapshot things. And that would actually
Sure.
alter the emissions that was coming out of the vehicle. So I knew something was up
Definitely.
with that.
And
the other part of
and
it,
that's potentially true. I haven't done that firsthand, so I can't speak on it. But if you like motorsports and you've been around motorsports history for a long time, you know that people come up with clever ways.
oh yeah,
to
if it's if it's not in the rules, it's got to be legal, right?
Well, I have heard people in racing say that the rule book is a blueprint for cheaters. That makes my heart sad when I hear that. But hey,
also it allows for clever engineering. So as much as it might, make you go, well, yeah, but on the other hand, sometimes when I see how it's engineered around the rules, I'm like, that took a lot of thought. And going back to the electric vehicle mandate, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong about this, but it certainly seems like the vehicle manufacturers that were all into electric vehicles, my prediction a couple of years ago was that they're going to say they're all in, they're going to try it, and if nobody sells it, they're going to go, hey, EPA, hey, government, this isn't working. We're going back to what we did before and what we did fairly well, and make
That's
gasoline,
exactly what we're finding now.
gasoline cars, and that seems to be exactly what's happening now. Is that electric vehicle mandate? I mean, Ford's cut way back. GM has cut way back. Land Rover said we're going to make electric vehicles, but now we're only going to make Land Rovers that are super expensive. The more affordable, if you want to use that word for a Land Rover, isn't going to exist anymore. So it is sort of interesting how it seemed like there was a, kind of a push and sort of a, well, they're doing it, so we better do it kind of thing. And still, I look at today.
Well,
right now, right. I look at today as November 10th, 2024, and I still think of this, and people sometimes kind of raise their eyebrows. This is still the golden age of the automobile. You can go out and you can buy a diesel, you can buy a gas car, you can buy a hybrid car, you can buy a battery electric car. In some places, you can buy a hydrogen fuel car. So we have more choices, and I think that is what you're doing. Is you built a prototype car that gives the motoring public more choices.
Well, you're exactly right. That's just the good old-fashioned American can-do entrepreneurial spirit. I saw everything going the wrong way. I saw lies. I saw politics. And I said, you know what? We can do it better for everybody. Why can't we build a car that is affordable, that is safe, that is more efficient? Heck, make it good-looking. It can be done. But we're not. And what's more sad than that is by nature of, shall we say, cultural norms and political pushes and such, people don't even realize what's possible anymore. We've gotten a long way away from working with our hands. And if I may make one funny little quote that usually is an internet meme, it's like, in the 1960s, the owner manual of a car would show people how to adjust their valves. Nowadays, it tells you not to drink the windshield wiper fluid. So it's just a matter of looking around at what we can actually do and do something better. And that's what I set out to do with the Omega car. And it sure opened up a can of worms with objectively looking at the nature of various political narratives, our industry, how the common perception of how people are looking at things. But yeah, it is possible now to build a very efficient internal combustion engine car that would be affordable and have a lower environmental impact than an electric. I think that's very important for people just to realize that's possible.
And that's just it. It's the idea of showing what's possible and showing that you did it in real time, that it truly exists. It's not the 200 mile per gallon carburetor from the back of Popular Mechanics in the 1960s. It's a vehicle that you can drive down the road. It gets, as you pointed out, high performance car acceleration, fantastic fuel economy. I would like to get 100 miles per gallon in any vehicle that I think the last thing I ever got that was 100 miles per gallon was a 49cc moped.
Yeah, well, and the funny thing is, in my car, I put a 5-gallon tank in. And it's funny because if I put a 15-gallon tank in it, I could drive 1,500 miles. But I thought about, like, that's crazy. 5 is plenty. I can go 500 miles on that tiny little tank alone. And I'm not going to want to drive that long. I'd have to stop it for the call of nature every 200 or so.
And you're right. And that's always been sort of the magic. That's way over the magic number of what vehicle manufacturers, either gasoline or electric, always wanted to do. They always sort of said, well, 300-mile range, whether it's a gasoline car, 300-mile range, whether it's an electric car, 300-mile range. And you're doing 500 miles with essentially $20 worth of fuel.
Yeah, exactly. And that depends on any given moment, but it's tremendous. And the other thing too is, diesel gets a bad rap, but if you just maintain your engine, and you tune it for efficiency and looking at things appropriately, they go and go and go. Think of all the semi trucks. Think of all the diesel cars that have many hundreds of thousands of miles on them. And that also is good for the environment because you don't have to continually manufacture new engines and new cars, because the manufacturing of a vehicle has a tremendous impact on the environment and tremendous cost. And we need less of that, not specifically for the nature of the environment and humanity and nature, but because who can afford that? Why don't we have affordable cars again? When people go to the dealership and trucks cost $70,000 to $100,000, and average cars of $30,000 to $50,000, and you look at what an average person's salary is, that is completely insane.
Yeah,
and I tell you this, as a car guy who's in his garage right now with a toolbox, I personally have never bought a new car or motorcycle, and at this rate, I never will, because it's more economical, it's more intelligent to buy something that's decent, that's used, that you can simply maintain. And I think we need to reassess what we do with industry, especially in America, because I know we could do it better.
Yeah, I can't disagree. And you brought up the point about people who work on vehicles and the trades in general. For every 5 people that leave a trade now, 2 to 3 people are replacing them. So it's going to get harder for people to fix vehicles. So having a longer lasting vehicle on the road, and one that requires kind of maintenance that people are familiar with, I think makes a lot of sense.
Well, and yes, you have a point relating to the trades. However, I do see a bit of a renaissance with that. But really, I think the trouble with modern cars and their difficulty in repairing it, they're being built only as a consumer throwaway disposable good to where it needs to be built again. Because really, if you look at cars, they haven't evolved much since the 1990s. That was a pretty good peak for cars, really, in terms of safety, economy, efficiency, etc. But since that time, automobile manufacturers have to keep doing things to make them interesting to sell new cars. But they're really not getting any better. They're just getting more whiz-bangy and more expensive. And they're trying to cut costs by the nature of manufacturing. So when a drivetrain is built for speed and efficiency of manufacturing, and it's all stuck together by robots and assembly lines, you're not building something that's serviceable. And then what happens is that goes down into the future, the world and the consumer, and now you have these terrible, toxic, expensive machines that can't even be serviced for the sake of a consumer culture with the automotive industry. And hey, we're off the rails and going the wrong direction. So with my Omega car and what I did, that was saying, hey, I may just be an individual that can build a single car, but I can show people to reassess and think that we can go a better direction. And when I do it and say it's a lot different than like Obama or something, say he's going to retool Detroit for the energy efficient cars of tomorrow at his big speeches, I actually went out and did it. So
yeah.
I just want people to know the good things that are possible.
It's interesting that you talk about things going in the wrong direction. I just answered an email for a reader this morning, and they were talking about a hybrid, and they were thinking about buying a hybrid car, and there was some little part that they saw, and it turned out to be it was 4 hours labor by a skilled technician to pull the hybrid battery pack out to be able to get to the little part to fix it. And their comment was, this is one reason I wouldn't buy a hybrid car, because of the complexity. But I also mentioned that, whoever thought it was a smart idea to put, Toyota put a starter under an intake manifold, or Cadillac did it back in the early 2000s with their North Star engine. Let's put it in the middle of the engine, which maybe for somebody sounded like a good idea, but the idea when a starter fails, you got to pull the intake manifold and all the junk out of the way to get to it, or Ford, for that matter, running a water pump off a timing chain that when everything leaks, you got to do a $3,000 timing chain water pump gear assembly. And it's like, does this make sense? And you look at sort of a diesel, and even a clean diesel, they're pretty simple.
They can be. You can also make them complicated like anything else, but you're exactly right. And, that's a syndrome of people that live their life in a cubicle designing things in a computer to build for the sake of manufacturing that say, oh, hypothetically, this can come out. They're not giving consideration to the serviceability and the life of a vehicle. And that gets into the old, the true cliche of how frustrated mechanics get and on a daily basis curse the engineers who designed it. That is a product of the exact same difficulty of us just building consumer throwaway goods with our modern cars. There are things that we can do about that. I don't buy new cars. I just won't. Yeah. Why would you go out and lose tens of thousands of dollars to depreciation? The fact of the matter is, people can service things that are worthwhile. So I buy a little bit older cars that are good and maintain them. And it's doing a lot better good for the environment. It's a heck of a lot better on our pocketbook. Helps our family move forward. And I think it's good for the nation, too. So, again, we're on the exact same page. It is a golden age, but there's a lot of absurdity out there with the cars. So it's going to be exciting to see what comes with the future. But for me, I had to build the Omega car as my little point.
So you think someone else's version of hell is taking 350 million vehicles that are on the road in the United States and replacing them with 350 electric vehicles isn't a good idea?
I would say that's not a version of hell. You'll create a hell landscape, and if it isn't in the United States, you're gonna destroy places like Africa and China with strip mining, and what's going to happen with that is you're going to make some people or some nations very, very wealthy. And I think when we all realize that and look at it, you can understand where all these electric vehicle mandates are coming from. And as one last final point, just some basic logic here, the man with the world's most prominent electric vehicle company is politically against the side that is trying to mandate electric vehicles. Something is wrong here. Something is rotten in Denmark, as my grandmother would say. So I think it's important that we don't let politicians and big powers dupe us all into doing things that only fill their pocketbooks and ruin everything for everybody.
Well, Casey, I want to thank you for taking some time out of your Sunday morning and tell us how we can find your YouTube channel and learn a little bit more about you.
Yes, well, the YouTube channel is very easy to find. It's Casey the Car Guy, C-A-S-E-Y, and it's the name is Casey Putsch, P-U-T-S-C-H, spelled like the rebellion and pronounced Putsch, as in put your money where your mouth is.
Casey, again, thank you for taking time out of your Sunday and joining us on the Car Doctor program.
Thank you, sir. It was a great honor.
All right, take care. Bye-bye now. Why don't we take a break, pay some bills? My name's John Paul. This is the Car Doctor program. If you want to join us, 781-837-4900 is the phone number, 781-837-4900. When we come back, we'll find out what kind of shenanigans Jesse's been up to the last 2 weekends where he hasn't been here, as well as some of the emails that came in this week. My name's John Paul. This is the Car Doctor program. You're listening on 95.9 WATD. We'll be right back.
Even car geeks and do-it-yourselfers rely on AAA to give them extra peace of mind on the road. AAA offers 24/7 roadside assistance, whether you're in your own vehicle, a friend's car, or even a rental. Combine that with great rates on insurance, hotel, gas, and dining savings, and discounts on 8,700 brands, and you're covered on and off the road. Get a special membership offer today at AAA.com/join. That's AAA.com/join.
Are you dreaming of a home that exudes quality and craftsmanship? Hi, I'm Sheldon Stewart of Stewart Painting, and we can turn those dreams into reality. At Stewart Painting, we specialize in both interior and exterior carpentry, ensuring that every detail of your space reflects your personal style. Let our team of professional carpenters take care of all your needs, from rot repair and intricate trim work to low-maintenance siding. Our expert carpenters have the skills and experience to bring your vision to life. And if you're tired of repainting and staining your deck every year, we can install low-maintenance decking for year-round enjoyment. We take pride in every detail, from the initial call to the final nail. With Stewart Painting, you're not just getting a service, you're investing in excellence. Visit us at stewartpaint.com to schedule an estimate and to hear about our financing options. Or call us at 508-362-8023. With offices in Hyannis and Hingham, with over 40 years of excellence, Stewart Painting. Expect the best.
Won't you step into the light?
Hi, I'm Dan Chauvin. Step into the light and tune into Twilight Showcase Radio, hosted by Sandy Stride and Keith James on 95.9 WATD and 95.9WATD.com. Search for Twilight Showcase on Facebook and visit twilightshowcase.org.
Twilight Showcase, tonight from 8 to 10 on 95.9 WATD. Make an appointment Sunday morning at 11 for John Paul, the Car Doctor, on 95.9 WATD. Now, back to the Car Doctor.
And welcome back to the Car Doctor program on 95.9 WATD. First off, Jesse, where have you been the last 2 weeks?
We had our live event in Block Island, Rhode Island, and that was really cool. We basically met up with a bunch of fans who got tickets to come out there and did a back-to-back spooky investigations on the very haunted and very fun Block Island. So
yeah, Block Island has this reputation of being haunted, right?
Yeah, they say like every building out there is haunted. But overall, I mean, it was like kind of off-season, but not completely, to where there's still some restaurants and bars that were open, but it wasn't flooded with tourists, which was really cool. So a couple of the hotels that we've always wanted to investigate were like off-season, so we were able to get full access to those entire hotels and take the group on a little tour, and luckily it worked out. When we first booked it, I was like, no one's gonna come to this. Like, we'll be all by ourselves, but we actually sold out. It was good.
And to give you credit here, the idea that you have this kind of fan base where people show up is that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that was cool, because the previous week we had like our live podcast, and that was good. We had like, I don't know, we filled up Barrel House Z. It was a good crowd that came out for that. But this one was a much bigger gamble because it's on an island, so people have to buy a plane ticket, then buy a ferry ticket, and then pay a good chunk of money to stay overnight on 2 nights. It was expensive, but people, they showed up and they came from all over. We had a couple come from Ohio, a guy came up from Georgia. People drove out from Jersey and New York, and it was impressive to see that people actually showed up for it. But it was also a ton of fun. So we're gonna try to do it again next year.
There you go. All right. Well, perfect. I always like to know, and you're maybe the second most famous YouTuber I know. So second most famous on today's show. Actually, that's
could be.
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
That's okay. That's all right.
No, I mean there's some of the automotive YouTube channels that I watch, and a lot of our listeners here watch them as well. I am and I guess I shouldn't be. I am somewhat shocked sometimes when I see, it's a guy who does some work to cars, and he's got his own sense of humor, and he goes against all the rules of how long a YouTube video should be. I watched most of a video that this one guy did. It was 3 hours long, and everybody said that's never going to work. It can't be more than 20 minutes or 30 minutes or something. 3 hours long.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're doing, because if you look at like Joe Rogan, obviously he's untouchable when it comes to media, but I mean every podcast he does is over 3 hours. Right. So it's like, okay, so that's not really the mold of what you're supposed to do podcasting wise. Yeah. But I think as long as you're doing something that holds people's interest. I mean, look at the guys in, I don't even know what country, but I find myself watching these guys that are in the jungle of some country building houses out of mud, and I'm like, all right, it's been 3 days, I have to stop watching these videos. But it gets you. So I mean, as long as you're doing something that can hold people's interest, I think anybody can make a channel about anything.
No, I was just this week there was an automotive event called SEMA out in Las Vegas, and it takes up the entire Vegas footprint just about. It's at the east side, it's at the west side, it's all over the place. And, pretty much most prominent YouTubers were there. If they weren't there, they had vehicles there that they had built for the SEMA event. And, I saw some of the meet and greets, and there was literally hundreds and hundreds of people waiting to get this person's autograph. And I'm like, well, they're entertaining to watch for 20 minutes or half an hour, but I don't know that I would wait in line. And the idea of the fan base on some of these YouTube channels is pretty phenomenal.
It's wild. I mean, it's the new TV stars, right? I mean, you go to Comic-Con and people are lined up out the door to meet some guy that was an extra in one episode of Star Trek or something, and it's not surprising that somebody on YouTube who gets millions of views would have a good fan base. It's cool to see.
I'm not waiting in line to get your autograph.
Me neither. Yeah. I'll just email you and have you send a copy of one.
Or you can send me a signed check. That would be good. I promise I won't cash it.
I'm paying you for this?
Why not? Why not? Hey. Anyway, if you would like to not talk about YouTube, or if you want to talk about YouTube, but no politics, please. This is a politically free channel, so if we can call it that, you can listen to Kevin Tachi on Monday night and talk Monday Night Talk if you want to talk politics. Here we don't talk about politics. We talk about cars, and if it trickles over into a little bit of politics like Casey was doing today, yeah, that's okay. But even that. Let's talk about cars. Let's talk about fun stuff. Somebody wrote to me and says, I have a 2021 Hyundai Tucson. The light on the dashboard keeps signaling the radar is blocked. I have been given a price to replace the system. Is there any possibility of having it repaired, not replaced? The dealership wants to replace it at a high cost. Thoughts? Oh, I always have thoughts. There are only two major components really to the system. There's a camera and the computer module. The module controls other systems, so unlikely that it is that problem, so which kind of leaves the camera. The cost of the camera is about $600 plus labor. This should have been covered by the Hyundai 5-year, 60,000-mile warranty, so I'm assuming they've exceeded the bumper-to-bumper warranty, so maybe they have a lot more miles on it. Could it be a wiring issue? Yes. It all runs through something called a CAN network, which is like a computer network in a business. Something could be pulling down one of the CAN lines, possible. But then where it's intermittent, it could be something blocking the camera, something like spider webs. I was driving a Subaru back some time ago, and it kept coming up front radar inoperative, camera block, something like that. And it was exactly that. It was a spider web that was kind of moving back and forth in front of the lens and causing it to, I guess, have weird readings and shut the system off. One other time I was driving a car with a front radar camera, and it wouldn't work for the first 20 or 25 minutes because of the morning dew kind of was covering the windshield. To me it looked like moisture was getting between the camera, so sort of on the inside of the windshield, which is supposed to be a sealed surface, and basically causing like steam on the inside of the windshield. Once the sun hit the car, it dried the car out enough, morning dew, it was fine. Everything was good afterwards. So, kind of a minor thing, but still, something that could happen. We talked about this a little last week, and it's worth talking about again because it's an email that I'm getting on a pretty regular basis. This person wrote to me and said, should I be concerned about buying a used car with all the devastating flooding that has taken place in the southern states? I'm considering a used car in the next few months, and this has me concerned. What should I be looking for? Yeah, it should have you concerned, really. According to the folks at Carfax, the place where you can research information about a vehicle, there are as many as 347,000 vehicles that have been flood damaged in this 2024 hurricane season. So 347,000 cars. Are they all going to end up in the used car market? No. Are some of them going to end up in the used car market? Good possibility. So if I was looking at a used car, first off, I'd probably try to get a professional look at it. But if you can't do that, You want to look at every little nook and cranny. You want to look for stuff like mud. You want to look for any accumulation of anything under the car that didn't get clean when maybe all they did was run it through a car wash. You want to look for any kind of moisture in headlights and taillights that could indicate water got up inside the vehicle. Any hint of rust stains inside the car. So brackets and, some of the, like seat brackets, for instance, those are typically just painted black. That paint can chip over time. It can show some level of rust. Could indicate water got inside the car. Does it smell like an old gym locker room inside of it? Or does it smell like the restroom of a newly cleaned bus station and smells like bleach and Pine Sol? In other words, is it wet, stinky, and mildewy, or is it like someone tried to deodorize and sanitize it and it made it too clean smelling? Either one of those can tell you that there's something going on. If it's an SUV and it has an under-mounted spare tire, pull the spare tire down. A lot of times when cars get cleaned, they don't clean up under there. If it was involved in, especially here in Florida and up through North Carolina, where there was huge storm surges and all this sandy mud showed up in people's cars, well, they may have not pulled the spare tire down to clean it, so you might pull the spare tire down and see it's all caked with mud, or they were smart enough to do that, and the spare tire is spotless. That isn't typical of doing a reconditioning of a vehicle. You don't pull the spare tire down. So there should be, if it's a 2 or 3 year old car, there should be some road dirt, but there shouldn't be caked with mud, and it also shouldn't be looks like somebody steam cleaned it and put it back up there. So either way could indicate anything. Chances are, if the unscrupulous dealer was smart, they changed all the fluids, but they might not have. Any fluids that look milky colored could indicate moisture got in there. And again, look at little nooks and crannies. Pull the air filter out. See what that looks. Pull the cabin air filter out. See what that looks like. Both of those could indicate something's going on with the vehicle. So, and also see how it was identified. Maybe they're being semi-honest when they're trying to sell it by saying the car has storm damage. Well, storm damage could be, I owned a car with storm damage. It got caught in a hailstorm up in New Hampshire, and the roof of it looked like someone took a ball-peen hammer and made little divots all across the top of the hood. And I didn't actually notice the hood until the sun hit it just right, and then I noticed the roof was the same way. Didn't impact the car, didn't break any paint, didn't really bother me. I got a really good deal on the car. I drove it for, 100,000 miles, and not a problem. But if it's flooded, different story. Right up the street from me is a Ford Thunderbird. I think it's 2002, maybe one of the first years. And the guy who bought it got what seems like a really good deal on it. I think he only paid $3,500 for it. And come to find out, it was a total loss. It was a total loss, and when I said to him, well, it's a total loss. He said, yeah, that's what it says on the title. And he said, well, I think it was some front end damage. And I'm like, I don't think. Maybe. Come to find out, it was a flood car. It was a flood car out of someplace like Lawrence or Lowell. How it ended up in Florida is one of those mysteries. The thing has never been right. It always has a battery charger on it because the battery continually goes dead. I think there's a series of electronics that are in the trunk that run both the top and the rear lighting, and my guess is something in there is shorted out and killing the battery and staying on all the time. When it runs great, but it doesn't always run good. So, or it doesn't always start because the battery's dead. So that kind of an issue can cause some problems, cause some expenses, and things you just need to be aware of. So, flood cars, can you get lucky? former police officer I know from, I want to say somewhere up in the Tewksbury area maybe, he bought a flood-damaged Porsche 911. Always wanted one. It was kind of his retirement gift to himself. It was quite a few years old. Had a check engine light on forever. And probably something, things that get wet, especially things that, fresh water's not bad. If it's a freshwater flood, it was caught in a rainstorm, sewer backed up, 2 feet of water, the whole car got wet. Fresh water dries out, it's usually pretty good. But brackish water, salt water, things can be okay, but they're slowly starting to corrode over time, and electrical connections can get worse and worse and worse. So, if you want to take a chance on a storm-damaged car, on a flood car, yeah, I know several people that have bought, formerly total vehicles and have had good luck with them. But there are others who haven't. So if you are out car shopping, use all your senses. Look at stuff, smell things, touch things. Make sure that you've spent a lot of time, and also, running a Carfax report or something similar. Carfax right now is doing a free flood check, where if you go in and you put the vehicle identification number in, it'll come up and see if the vehicle was ever in a flood, which is great if the car was totaled. If it wasn't totaled, for whatever reason, maybe the people didn't have insurance, didn't total the car, and they're just trying to sell it themselves. You don't know that. So the Volkswagen that we keep here, that we brought from Massachusetts to here, the water got pretty deep around here. And I want to say there was probably 8 inches of water in my yard. The Volkswagen is only 6 inches off the ground, but fortunately it looks like that water came and went pretty quickly. Doesn't look like it caused any problems with the car. Car started right up, ran fine, brakes were good and quiet. Didn't see anything peculiar under the hood. Well, looks like maybe something was living under there for a little bit, but maybe they left after the floodwaters left. But other than that, everything seemed fine. So, but still, same idea. Someone wrote to me and said, every time I have my car, I read your column and find it informative. I have something that you might want to pass on to your readers. So in this case, pass on to my listeners. Last month, my son had new tires installed on his Volkswagen by a nationwide chain. Didn't say who it was. When he picked up the car at the shop, he was told that his brake pads would need to be changed soon. He called me and asked if we'd do a brake job some Saturday. I ordered all new rotors and brake pads, and he brought the car over this past weekend. When he arrived, I told him to break the lug nuts loose before we jacked up the car. He took out the lug wrench that came with the VW toolkit, which is useless actually because it's only about 12 inches long, and he couldn't get the lug nuts loose. I gave him a 24-inch breaker bar and a socket, and he proceeded to try to break the lugs loose. He says, my son's a big guy. He tried to remove the first lug. The socket snapped. Well, to sum it up, we needed to use a 17-millimeter impact socket, a 24-inch breaker bar, and a 4-foot length of pipe to loosen the lug nuts. If he ever had a flat tire and was stranded by the side of the road, he would have never been able to remove the lugs with the Volkswagen-provided lug wrench. The end result would have been he would have had to have his car towed to the shop. Why don't tire stores use the recommended torque setting on wheels is just puzzling. Inform your readers and listeners they might want to check their lug nuts after they have new tires installed on their cars. Well, certainly a good reminder. Some readers even tell me they leave notes in their cars to hand tighten or use a torque wrench to tighten the wheels. Having wheels this tight indicates, in my opinion, a lack of training, or they just don't take any satisfaction in doing the job. The final tightening of any wheel should be done with a torque wrench. In the case of most Volkswagens, it's 85 to 90 foot-pounds. Some shops use a special socket called a torque stick, which is supposed to limit torque. Even using torque sticks, in my opinion, the final tightening should be checked with a torque wrench. The torque wrench also should be periodically recalibrated to see if it's okay. I had 4 tires put on my car. On the invoice, it said wheels tightened to 100 foot-pounds. And the specification was 80 foot-pounds. So they're 20 foot-pounds too tight. At least they were even. Why don't we take a quick break? When we come back, we'll talk to Ken in Topsfield and Tom in Pembroke. My name's John Paul. This is the Car Doctor program. You're listening on 95.9 WATD.
Even car geeks and do-it-yourselfers rely on AAA to give them extra peace of mind on the road. AAA offers 24/7 roadside assistance, whether you're in your own vehicle, a friend's car, or even a rental. Combine that with great rates on insurance, hotel, gas, and dining savings, and discounts on 8,700 brands, and you're covered on and off the road. Get a special membership offer today at AAA.com/join. That's AAA.com/join.
Since 1998, Damien's in Hanson has been providing great food, drink, live entertainment, and fun in a comfortable and relaxed pub atmosphere. Their award-winning kitchen is open for lunch 7 days a week, and the pub stays open each night till 1. Grab a classic South Shore bar pie, or enjoy other Damien's favorites, like the house-made steak tips or chicken wings. Whether you're looking for something to eat, or just thirsting for the coldest beer in town, you don't have to search any further than Damien's. So drop in to Damien's Pub, located at 279 Spring Street in Hanson.
Hey there, folks. It's Quinn Kelly reminding you to tune in Sunday night at 5 for the South Shore's first voice in sports talk radio, The Sports Exchange. Unmatched coverage of local high school action, as well as a relatable voice on all things Boston Pro Sports. We've got you covered live at 5 every Sunday night. Have a question for our host, missed last week's show, or just want to share a great sports story? You can find us on Twitter at SE on WATD. But remember, mark your calendar, folks, and we'll see you Sunday night at 5 for The Sports Exchange on 95.9 WATD.
Make an appointment Sunday morning at 11 for John Paul, the Car Doctor, on 95.9 WATD. Now, back to the Car Doctor.
And welcome back to the Car Doctor program on 95.9 WATD. Let's go to Ken in Topsfield. Ken, good morning.
Good morning to you, John. I had a quick question. I'm storing my old car with old radial tires, and I normally leave around 36 pounds in it when I drive it during the summer months. And I heard a few weeks ago you or somebody on your show mentioned pumping it up, putting extra air in. And
yeah,
I don't know, they say 10 pounds. That seemed like
the safety side of me says never put more than whatever the maximum is. So if the tire says 32, don't put more than, if that's the maximum inflation. If the tire says 43, but the car says 36, you can put 43 in. Can you go 5 pounds over the standard tire pressure without any problem? Sure you can. Because over time, that tire is going to lose a little bit of air. The other good idea, too, is go to Home Depot or someplace and buy a 4-foot square of like 1-inch thick construction styrofoam, the stuff they use to insulate the outside of a house. Buy that, cut it into four pieces, park the car on top of the styrofoam, and it'll prevent any flat spotting on the tires.
Cool.
Okay?
I'll do that. Thanks.
All right.
Have a good week.
Right. You as well, Ken. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Let's talk to Tom in Pembroke. Tom, good morning. Tom?
I had a question about the flooding cars things.
Okay.
Whose idea was to put the computers under the seats where all the junk collects?
A good question, because that was one of the things I looked at with my wife's car. I looked under there, and the module for the airbags are under there. There's a whole bunch of stuff stuffed under there, and it should. You would think it would be up higher and better positioned. So I don't know who thought that was a good idea. The same people who thought putting a starter in the V of an intake manifold and then covering up with the intake manifold and then covering up with 6,000 vacuum lines and fuel lines and other stuff and 3 miles of electrical wire. Whoever thought that was a good idea. Same people.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally
like Casey, earlier said, that's kind of the trouble sometimes when, cubicle engineers design cars. They don't design them for serviceability.
Yeah. I mean, is it possible to take a modern car and completely eliminate all the electronics just to have an engine turning and a transmission and the wheel?
Could you? Yeah, I mean, you can, because, hot rodders buy, Hellcat engines, for instance, and they buy a very basic computer harness, or they do something completely different. They take the fuel injection system off and they put a carburetor on it. And so they'll buy a late model, LS engine out of a truck or something, and they'll put a carburetor on it to eliminate, fuel injection computers, and then they'll use the crankshaft-driven, ignition system. So kind of you can. I mean, I answered a question a couple weeks ago. Somebody had a Saturn they bought for free, or they got for free, because the alternator wouldn't charge the battery. And the problem is it was the alternator voltage regulator side runs off the computer module. Because it's a Saturn, they don't make the computer module anymore. So the car runs good until the battery goes dead. And my suggestion was go to a hot rod shop, something like Summit Racing, buy a one-wire alternator, which is basically a GM alternator that all you do is hook it up to the battery, and it senses battery voltage and charges the battery up, almost like an old-fashioned generator did. And that will keep, it won't charge at an idle, but once you're driving, it'll keep the battery charged. Sure, you're going to have a check engine light on, you're going to have an alternator light on, but the car will run and drive, and you can kind of get away with it. So, there's ways around technology sometimes when you have to. Back, a few weeks ago, maybe even longer, we had, Brenda Priddy on. She was a, world-renowned spy photographer, still does a little bit of that. And, she was in Cuba, and we were talking about, how the Cubans keep some of these cars running with parts that they're basically making in little, backroom machine shops. You can always do it if you have enough, if you have enough talent, that's helpful. If you have enough time, that's helpful. And, sometimes it takes money to do it. So it really kind of depends.
Yeah, and you take out miles of wires and
oh, yeah.
computers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I looked it up, and I don't remember what it was now because I just don't remember. But I want to say there's something like 3.5. That can't be that much. Could be. Maybe 3.5 miles of wiring in today's vehicles.
Wouldn't surprise me.
That's a lot. That's a lot of wiring. So all of that stuff is going to be a problem. So those are all things you got to think about.
Yeah.
Hey Tom, always good to talk to you. We gotta get going. Time is running out here. So.
All right, thank you.
But thanks for calling in. Next week, as far as I know, we don't have a guest scheduled, so we'll have the whole hour to chat with each other. Until next week, make sure you wear your seatbelt, drive safely, be good to your car, and if you see a vehicle on the side of the road, slow down or move over. It saves lives. Talk to you all next week. Bye-bye.